Hey, Stephen Young here with another episode of the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast. And yes, I'm still playing with my little red wagon, Dodge A100 pickup truck model with its opening doors and steering front wheels and all this detail. Kind of a cool little model. And yes, of course, this is a reference to the fact we're still in the Dodge chapter of my 2013 book, Steve Magnanti's 1001 Muscle Car Facts. You can find this book sometimes at Barnes & Noble, although Barnes & Noble, the transportation section is getting smaller and smaller. But with that said, you can absolutely find this book through CarTech Publishing or online at Amazon or even eBay will have copies of this. So if you want to read along at home, you can grab a copy of this. Or if you want to read along for free or hear along for free, you can do that. Just listen to these podcasts. This is show 55, although there are 54 previous episodes. They're all about a half hour long, and each one of them covers everything from Chevy to Pontiac to Olds to Buick to Plymouth and now Dodge. So before we start, I want to thank our sponsors at High Octane Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership. They're located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. High Octane Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Yeah, Ferraris, Lambos, stuff like that. Porsches, they do that, as well as Chevelles, GTOs, Roadrunners, GTXs, that kind of stuff. So you can call the folks at High Octane Classics at 508-859-4515. Okay, as you all may know, this book is divided into chapters by make, but each of those chapters is broken into 5 subsections, which include legend and lore, body and interior, engine and driveline, suspension and brakes, and then something called number crunching and press commentary. And for me, this and engine and driveline are my 2 favorite parts. Well, on this episode, show 55, we're transitioning from suspension and brakes directly into number crunching and press commentary on the Dodge muscle car era. So this could be a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. So let's get started with number crunching, statistics, and press commentary, what the magazines and TV shows said about these cars when they were new, with Fact 781. Okay. The September 1969 issue of Car Life magazine contains a reader letter from Clifford L. Moffett of Sherman, Texas. It reads, quote, I own a 1967 Dodge Charger 440 and have been trying to buy a rear spoiler for it. No luck so far. The local Dodge dealer says he can't find the parts number, and I've received no answer from Chrysler after writing them. Can you help? End of quote. Magazine editors responded thus. Quote, the Charger spoiler originally was a racing item only. NASCAR permitted them on the grounds of safety. Later, in very limited quantity, they did become a production item. But now there's no part number available on them, and Dodge representatives tell Action Line he doubts there are any left in stock. End of quote. The spoiler in question was made from extruded aluminum and comprised 3 parts, which stood about 1 inch above the tail of the trunk and quarter panels. A series of flush mount screws secured it to the deck lid and body. I have only seen one example perched atop the trunk of a 1967 Hemi Charger, personally. Yeah, this is interesting. By most accounts, the 67 Charger trunk spoiler is the first application of a wing on a production car in a regular installation basis on the assembly line. And not to be confused at all with the 69 Charger Daytona or 70 Superbird. Those wings are huge. You can't miss them from a mile away. But these little Charger pieces, again, were about 1 inch long, or tall, I should say, and they went the entire width of the tail of the car. And in fact, there's a picture from the Dodge News Bureau from like late 66 showing an assembly line worker screwing one of these things down onto the tail of a Charger. And again, I've only seen one of these things. It was in Worcester, Massachusetts, where there was a burgundy 67 4-speed Hemi Charger parked on a side street just off Park Ave. About 1982 or 3, I photographed it with my little black and white camera. In fact, I've written some stories about it. If you Google Steve Magnanti 67 Hemi Charger spoiler or whatever, you might be able to find them. It's been in like Mopar Muscle, Carcraft, Hot Rod. I've actually run those pictures in a bunch of different places because it's so unusual. But again, it is true. Now, the one thing I do wonder about A lot of times car magazines, letters to the editor will actually not be written by a reader. And I do wonder if maybe this was something that Dodge said, hey, Car Life, can you help us with something? Would you publicize and just come up with a letter to help us get people out, to let them know that we don't have these anymore? It wouldn't be the first time where you could smell a fish with certain letters to the editor. You say, wait a minute, it doesn't seem like it's serving some other purpose. So it's possible. But again, that's what makes this so much fun, interpreting the inner meaning of some of these things. Okay, let's continue. Fact 782, very historic day. July 20th, 1969 was a very important day in history. Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and the Charger Daytona began high-speed testing at Chrysler's Chelsea, Michigan proving grounds with Charlie Glotzbach and Buddy Baker at the wheel. While Soviet intelligence systems kept an eye on the lunar landing, several light aircraft circled overhead as the Daytona lapped the 5-mile, 6-lane, 31-degree banked Chelsea circuit at speed. Aboard the low-flying craft were observers from Dearborn who had invited themselves to watch the process. The Daytona only hit 194 miles per hour, but it has recently come to light its Hemi was intentionally choked by a 750 CFM carburetor. Chrysler's Larry Rathgeb and George Wallace didn't want to see more than 200 miles per hour that day. They knew the word would spread too quickly and spoil the surprise. Within a week, unwanted scrutiny had lessened, and Glotzbach was regularly orbiting the track at an astonishing 204 miles per hour. These facts here were described in numerous places. In particular, one is a book called Supercar. I forget the author's name, but it's basically the story of the wing car program in 69, or 68, 69, 70. And it describes this very incident right here. So it's pretty cool stuff. It's true that Ford would send people flying over in planes over the Chelsea, Michigan track to observe what's going on. It's, espionage and counterintelligence. And in fact, Ford has a massive outdoor test track, the proving grounds at Dearborn, Michigan. In fact, if you fly into Detroit Metro Airport, I think it is, if you look out the right-hand side of the airplane, you'll look down on the Dearborn test track. And if you can have your binoculars out, you might even see some pre-production prototype Mustangs or who knows what being driven around. But again, proving grounds, a lot of crazy stuff happens there, including on the day of the Apollo 11, the Charger broke the 200 mile per hour barrier. Pretty cool. And again, that Charger was not a standard production car. Those things would not go 200 miles per hour, no matter what the guy next door tells you. That would have been a fully modified and prepared NASCAR Charger Daytona. Okay, let's move on to more recent goodies here. Fact 783. Friday, March 6th, 2005 was a tough day for me. 2 days before, I got a call from BBD&O, Dodge's advertising agency, asking if I was available to be on camera for a Dodge Charger TV commercial. The plan was to recreate the Barrett-Jackson auction block inside the historic Barker hangar at the Santa Monica, California airport, and have some fun as a new 2006 Hemi Charger crossed the fictitious auction block. To add realism, Dodge had Barrett-Jackson set up the actual Scottsdale, Arizona auction block, and 100 Hollywood extras were hired to play the part of audience members and bidders. They even brought in Alan Cadenet, Craig Jackson, Spanky and Amy Asseter, and me to make the illusion complete. My role was to announce the car before bidding commenced. Perched atop a 40-foot lift, I was teamed with veteran character actor Roger Nolan and had to say these words on cue, beginning quote. It's a 2006 Hemi Charger in Inferno Red Crystal Pearl, end quote. Well, time and again, I screwed up the paint name, much to the joy of the director, who was tasked with resetting the stage scene after my many bloopers. I finally got a clean take, but will never forget the horror of being tongue-tied with 200 people holding their breath, hoping I'd get it right. Incidentally, the Hemi Charger used in the commercial bore serial number 00027 and was a pre-production pilot car. The commercial ran for 19 weeks and was my first union TV gig. Again, this book I wrote in 2013 when that horrible day was a fresh memory. But it's true, I do remember getting a call. I was living in El Monte, California at the time, and I'd been with the Barrett-Jackson broadcast for I think maybe a year or two. And for some reason, they called me instead of Mike Joy or any one of the other people. to be the face of the Barrett-Jackson broadcast. Kind of weird. So me and this guy, Roger Nolan, sat in this elevated thing, and it was up to me to remember those horrible words. I shouldn't say horrible, but Inferno Red Crystal Pearl. How about just red? But anyway, with that said, the ad ran for quite a long time, and I can tell it now, and I've paid my taxes, but I made about $20,000 that day. I'm non-union, still non-union, but with that said, you can do a couple of non-union gigs before you have to join. But what happens is the commercial runs, and every time it runs, you get a check, a residual check, like every month, with a tally of where it ran and when. And by the end of the year, I get these checks for $700, $800, $900, something like that. 20 grand at the end of the year to speak those words for a TV commercial. So I always say, anybody who's in California or near a production center, you're insane not to explore a little of extra work or some commercial work. It can pay very well. But of course, I haven't done a TV commercial since. So that was my one day of glory, if you will, in the world of TV commercials. Okay, let's move on to a more happy fact with number 784. Quote, wide open throttle bursts with 12.5 to 1 and 11 to 1 ratio engines must be limited to 15 seconds to prevent engine damage, end quote. Published in a 426 Stage 3 Max Wedge Service Bulletin dated December 14th, 1963. That's lawyer speak for don't stand on it for too long or you'll suck the pan dry and wipe out the rod bearings. With a typical well-tuned Ram Charger running mid-11s in the quarter mile, there's plenty of cushion in the 15-second suggestion. Yeah, it's true. If you look at those catalogs and owner's manuals for the Max Wedge and even the Race Hemi stuff, they say, prolonged it running for 15 seconds or more, don't do it. It is true. With the stock oiling system, the high volume pump could draw all the oil up out of the pan and you could spin those bearings pretty quick. But again, wide open for 15 seconds is something you're not going to do on the drag strip unless you're spinning the tires all the way down. That's pretty unlikely. But it is true that more than a few people would take their Max Wedges and Race Hemis out on the highway and just try to, get to 150, 60 miles per hour and in many cases suck that pan dry. This is why companies like Keith Black would sell external oiling systems with swinging pickups, high volume pumps and pans and that kind of stuff. The stock Hemi pumps and pans were decent, but again, under 15 seconds at wide open or else you might get in some trouble. Okay, fact 785. Rarity often goes hand in hand with low demand. It's hard to imagine in today's world where shaker hood Challengers and Cudas are worth their weight in gold. But in 1970, only 184 Challenger customers paid the modest $97.30 upcharge for the N96 shaker hood. That's roughly 1 in 418 cars, considering that there were 76,935 Challengers built in 1970. So again, 1 in 418 got the shaker. The ratio looks better for 1971, with 224 shakers installed on 26,299 Challengers built in total, or roughly 1 in 117 Challengers, better than 1 in 418, but still not a lot. Of course, let's remember the shaker wasn't available on Slant 6, 318 two-barrel, or 383 two-barrel cars, but you'd still think more buyers would have been tempted by the macho exposed shaker unit. Perhaps folks worried about rain, snow, and dust polluting the engine and shied away. Later in the decade, Pontiac capitalized on a non-functional shaker-style hood scoop, which helped sell hundreds of thousands of Firebird Trans Ams. Dodge was just a little bit ahead of the curve on this one. It is true, today we see shaker-equipped cars and even clones with reproduction shakers. The demand is so high. But back in 1970 and 71, again, a minuscule number of these cars were ordered. And again, the shaker only cost $97.30 back then. Today, they're more like $6,000 to install one on your car with reproduction parts. But they're great. The shaker hood is awesome. And yes, the Challenger today can be had with a shaker hood right from Dodge. The good old days are right now. Okay, we want to thank our friends at High Octane Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. High Octane Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. You can give them a call at 508-859-4515. Let's get back to the show with fact number 786. December 6, 1963 was a momentous day. The first 426 Hemi ran under its own power. Previous valve train testing was done using electrically driven fixtures, but this was the real thing. The The first running engine, a single 4-barrel NASCAR spec track Hemi with 426 cubic inch displacement, was a precursor to the small fleet of engines built to run at the 1964 Daytona 500, a mere 4 weeks away on February 23rd of 1964. It is likely that the first running engine was sacrificed on the dynamometer and subsequently scrapped. Numerous first-hand accounts indicate the early blocks developed fatal main bearing bulkhead fractures after 400 miles of simulated testing. Hand-filed casting cores to add material in this critical area saved the day, but not until numerous blocks were ventilated on the dyno. Rumors persist that the engine blocks used in the Daytona 500 were still warm to the touch, having emerged from the iron foundry just days before the race. It is true, if you read a series of books about this, but the best one I've seen is We Were the Ram Chargers by Dave, I forget his last name, but Dave somebody, great author. But We Were the Ram Chargers. In there, Thornton and Hoover are interviewed, and they describe the panic of bringing those hand-filed engine blocks to and from the foundry, and just the scamper to get those things done. But of course, the end result was sweeping the Daytona 500 first, second, and third spots. Richard Petty, of course, taking the win and starting the Hemi legacy right there. But it almost didn't happen. Okay, let's move on way down the road to the Dodge Aspen of the 1970s with Fact 787. The wind tunnel validation wasn't part of the program. The 1976 Dodge Aspen Coupe managed to glide through the air with 10% less aerodynamic drag than a comparable 1975 Dodge Dart. In real-world testing, the more slippery shape delivered a 2.5% increase in fuel economy. Side-by-side comparisons of a 1975 Dart and a 76 Aspen revealed 15.0 versus 15.4 miles per gallon, respectively. This is back in the mid-70s, late 70s, when 15 miles to the gallon was considered pretty decent. Today, well, I think a Demon or a Hellcat will get better fuel economy than that, thanks to its multi-overdrive and EFI system. But back in the mid-70s, the Aspen taking over for the Valiant, or the Dart, I should say, 15.5 miles per gallon was a big deal. Okay, let's move down back into the 60s with some Hemi information with Fact 788. Between February 23rd and May 23rd, 1968, workers at the Dodge Hamtramck, Michigan assembly plant must have wondered why Dodge Darts were rolling off the end of the assembly line without any paint, just gray primer. A quick look at the LO23 VIN prefix would have cleared any confusion. The second character, O, stood for Superstock, a realm where the abnormal is normal. A total of 80 Darts and 70 Barracudas were partially assembled at Hamtramck, Michigan with 383 wedge drivetrains, then trucked to nearby Hurst Industries for Hemi conversion. After completion, but still in primer, the cars were returned to Chrysler's U-Drive lot for customer pickup. It's true, if you study pictures of the Hurst Hemi Dart and Barracuda history, you'll see a lot of pictures of these things with gray primer from the doors back and black gel coat from the front fenders and hood and valance. That's because these cars were built intentionally without proper paint. The idea being that Dodge wanted these things to be used on the racetrack, and they wanted racers to add their own personal race car graphics. And it was part of the idea to not have these things be on the street, although they were technically legal for street use. And more than a few people absolutely registered these things for street driving. One of them is Steve Atwell, a Mopar fanatic from Detroit. And he's got a 68 Hemi Dart that is driven on a very regular basis. But again, those primered Hemi cars must have been pretty weird for the Dodge assembly line quality control guys to say, okay, in primer, off it goes. But that was the story on those cars, the Hemi Darts and Barracudas of 1968. Okay, let's get into the 70s and or later times with Fact 789. 9,527 Dodge truck buyers were attracted by the 2004 through 2006 Ram SRT-10's many charms. Of course, that's the Viper-powered pickup truck we talked about in the last episode. In specific, in 2004, 3,057 were built. In 2005, 4,097 were built. And in 2006, 2,373 of these V10 pickup trucks were built. In comparison, records indicate a nearly equal number of buyers, 9,845, bought 4 26 Street Hemi powered Dodge and Plymouth muscle cars in 1966 through 71. Between these performance peaks during the dark days of the late 1970s and early 80s, the Little Red Express offered a glimmer of hope and found 7,306 buyers, of which 2,188 were 1978 models and 5,118 were 1979 models. Not a bad tally considering the anti-performance climate of the day. An alternate to the Little Red Express was the Warlock. With its standard slant 6 engine, the 318, 360, 400, and 440 were optional. The Warlock was more of a trim package than a performance vehicle. It's true, a lot of Dodge people remember, hey, the 360 powered Little Red Express was a big deal, but what about that 440 Warlock? That was cooler. Well, the Warlock wasn't always 440 powered. Some were, but a lot had slant 6s, 318s, 360s. But again, the Little Red Express was strictly 360 powered. I do wonder at times why Dodge didn't just go all the way and put the 440 into the Little Red Express, but it wasn't done. The 360, however, was more than just a Volare station wagon engine. It was the E58 high-performance police 4-barrel 360 with, I think, 220 horsepower. So it wasn't just a plain 360, but it would have been cool if the 440 was the engine in the Little Red Express. More is always better. Okay, fact 790, more Hemi info, Hemi truck information, an experience I had. Again, fact 790. In 2002, a full year before Dodge officially revealed its plans to reintroduce the Hemi in light trucks and later passenger cars, I was employed as technical editor at Hot Rod Magazine. The publisher worked out a deal with Dodge to supply us with a new black 2002 Ram 1500 short bed pickup and a 528 cubic inch Hemi crate engine. You can guess what happened next. Though it flagrantly violated California's strict emission standards, the resulting 4,901-pound Hemi Ram built by Tony Thacker and the SoCal Speed crew was very popular around the office and enjoyed clear sailing for street driving thanks to its Michigan manufacturer's license plates. On March 17, 2002, I took the Hemi Ram to the Irwindale 8th Mile drag strip and made 19 passes, the best of which was an 8.4 at 85.13 miles per hour, roughly equal to a 1280 at 110 in the full quarter mile. The next morning, its stock 9 1/4 inch rear axle succumbed to the 454 horsepower and 481 foot-pounds of torque at the tires and stranded me at the busy intersection of the 605 and 10 freeways with a broken Spider gear graw shaft. Mopar Performance Motorsports marketing manager David Hakeem next dayed a fresh axle, disc to disc, and I fixed it in my El Monte driveway. The crazy part is that we were largely clueless to the fact Dodge's new third-generation 5.7-liter Hemi Magnum was less than a year away. In hindsight, it's clear Dodge had us build and write about the truck to whet public appetite for what became the Hemi Magnum Ram pickup truck. But at the time, their lips were sealed. Yeah, it's true. If you study Hot Rod Magazine and my website and various things, I absolutely took that black Hemi Ram pickup, which was hand-built by the guys at SoCal Speed, and drove it around LA. I remember I was amazed. It was a brand new black pickup with sort of a custom Hemi Coke bottle graphic on the side with a red perimeter around it. Big Budnik wheels, but it had a 528 Hemi under the hood with a carburetor. This is California, where the emissions are like impossible. But again, I had Michigan manufactured plates on that thing, so I basically had a God pass to drive that thing wherever I wanted. But I remember pulling into gas stations and opening the hood to check the oil, and people come running over expecting to see a 318 or a 360, and there was this crazy 528 Hemi. Now that vehicle had kind of a sad end. I think it went on Power Tour. I remember it was on Power Tour, and one of the editors was driving it with no oil in the oil pan. The thing was burning oil like crazy. I don't know what was wrong with it, but basically they didn't spin the bearings, but I remember we put 5 quarts of oil in the engine on the side of Route 40 or something like that. And later on, the engine was removed. The truck itself sat around. I think the guys from Four Wheeler magazine maybe got the engine or something, but the truck itself languished with no engine, and I don't know where it is now, but it was a pre-production truck, and the whole idea was to get the public thinking about Hemi engines, Dodge Ram trucks, which of course came along in 2003 as a 2004 model. Of course, right after that, the Challenger, the Charger, the 300, the Magnum, the rear-wheel drive Hemi Renaissance was on, but I like to think we played a small role in helping to get the world ready for Hemi pickup trucks with that 528 crate motor powered black pickup truck. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast. We'll be back shortly with more, but we certainly want to thank our sponsors at High Octane Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. High Octane Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Give them a call at 508-859-4515. And we'll be back soon with the next episode of the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast, continuing in the Dodge realm. Until then, hasta mañana.